I want to talk about something that happens far too often. You get an artist who downloads a beat and works off that to create the song. So they basically layer several vocals, for example, it could be six, eight, 10, whatever, and they create their whole song, verse, choruses, but all the music was done by a guy who made the beat. What will happen is when it's time to mix the song, they purchase the either multi-track files if they're lucky, they can get those, or the stems. Now, what happens far too often is the person selling the beat decided not to make stems because they were lazy, and they basically now just use an AI stem splitter thinking that that's okay, that they could still get paid for stems and not have to take the time to print stems or make stems, however they're creating the beat. It's either if it's all in the box, it's super easy to do. So it takes very little time, but it still takes time and effort and thought. And that's why therein lies the rub. A lot of people won't do it because of that, I guess, or it's just certain beat makers who do that. But the point is this: if you're mixing the stuff and I get files that are clearly split with a stem splitter because I hear all the artifacts, certain things are like on top of each other that shouldn't be. A bass is also kind of in with the keyboard track that's not a bass, but it's only in certain sections and it sounds like an MP3 from back in like the late 90s kind of thing. Like if it sounds like crap, right? Like uploaded on a 56K modem, if you know what I'm talking about. And you're listening and you're like, man, this is like, it's not in your interest for me to basically mix this the way it is because I'm going to hit a wall in certain places. I have to put everything to be exactly how the beat was, where it's basically like I'm not even mixing it for you, or I try to mix it and disguise all these artifacts and this terrible version of the stuff that was sent to me and is masquerading as multi-tracks or stems. So that's a thing where, people take advantage of people as often as they can. And that's why whenever somebody says to me, oh, no, I can buy the stems, it's like an upgrade, it's an upgraded price. Well, are they really stems? Like the way they're supposed to be? Or are they split with an AI tool? Can you get the multi-tracks of all the stuff separated completely all by itself? Or is it done by some ridiculous AI splitter? These things all matter. You should not be paying for stems. Like, you should be able to get your money back if people say they're going to give you stems or multi-tracks and it winds up being an AI split version, because whatever you paid for that, I guarantee you it's more than a few dollars. And doing that on my own time as the mixer, I could have done the same thing and wouldn't have charged you anything extra for it. I just still mixed it if you wanted me to, for the same price as the mix would have cost, and I just split the stuff up myself if all I had was an AI splitter version of it and I had no other choice. Like, so what I'm saying is they're probably getting away with charging a lot for it, I bet, and it's a total scam. You're getting scammed. So go through anything you wind up when you buy the stems or multi-tracks from somebody, go through and figure out what it is you really got. Solo the tracks, turn them up. Put a limiter on it if you have to and really kind of crank the level. Make it, just like overdo, like compress it, use some makeup gain to make it louder, just so you could hear everything in there, you know, at a volume. So you really know what you're getting. And anytime you hear artifacts and all that nonsense, like, we have to educate people on what that stuff sounds like so that you don't wind up getting totally taken advantage of. I think this is crazy that people would do that. But we live in a business where people will take advantage of people every chance they get. It's really unfortunate. So there's no way to put a stop to it. And I don't know how you'd ever get your money back when, they say they gave you the stems and they used some AI split version that you could have used for free practically. Some of them are there's trials where you could do it for free, or you pay like $20 and you could do 100 songs practically. I mean, depending on when the deals are running, but it's so ridiculous to have to pay for that. I don't understand. So anyway, it's crazy to me. It's crazy. And I'm over here with the artist's best interest in mind. The beat person sells their beats and they don't have the artist's best interest in mind if they didn't take the time to prepare that ahead of time. People are going to want the stems. They're going to want the stuff separate. So get it ready for them. Like, don't make a beat without that part of it. That's critical. It's essential. Don't just crap out a ton of beats that are just the mixes thinking, "Oh, I'll just use the stem splitter to split them." You're taking advantage of people if you do that. So, the rest of us who are, a lot of us are on the side we're on. We just gotta be honest with the artist. "Look, you got something that's not what you should have got. I'm gonna teach you how to figure that out by soloing the freaking thing and making it loud enough that you could hear all these problems. It should be clean. If it's a keyboard part, it should not sound like there's artifacts, and this is what it sounds like to have artifacts. I don't wanna play that specific beat on here and show you what that is because this video will get demonetized or something if, there's something up with that audio, and I don't wanna even take that risk, so I'm not gonna play that, but the point is, it's so obvious to the ear when you have an instrument by itself and then you have an instrument that has all these artifacts that you know what it sounds like. Like we all know what it sounds like. I'm sure there's plenty of examples out there where you can hear what it sounds like for artifacts on there. And if there are not, let me know. Maybe I'll make a specific something just with that where I can kind of use my own stuff and show you what artifacts sound like and how imperfect these AI things are. They get better all the time, but they're so far from as good as multitracks and stems at this point in July of 2025. They're not there yet. These people are just robbing you. So anyway, I don't know. This stuff matters to me, and I can get a better result on the mixing end if I had every piece separately. So real quick, multitracks means every track in the session, the multitude of tracks, all of them. That's multitracks. Stems is actually an abbreviation for stereo mixes. STE, stereo. M's, mixes. That's what it is. So in other words, a stem isn't even a stem really, in my opinion, unless it has more than one track on it. If it's one track, it's a multitrack. It could be a processed multitrack or an unprocessed multitrack, but to me, that's still a multitrack. A stem has to be a mix of something, which means more than one thing put together. Bam. Okay, it could be 2 keyboards, could be 3 keyboards, could be 20 keyboards, but that's a stem. As long as you're mixing 2 things together, it's a stereo mix of something. That's a stem. So could be all the stuff in the song as stems is often fine as long as it's done in a way that makes sense, because a lot of songs, depending on the content, right? Like in this particular song I was working on, it's a very kind of ballad type sparse track. So I was able to create kick and snare just out of the one sample I had that had kick and snare on it. I'm able, like, because the guy printed a drum stem off the AI splitter, and I was able to actually separate kick and snare and get a little bit of control there, because that stuff is like, we need that. If it's together, it's a drum stem. If it's the kick separate, snare separate, tom separate, hi-hat separate, if it's everything separate, it's multi-tracks. You get what I'm saying? So, however, if you combine 2 or 3 snares, that could technically be called a snare stem. So if you combine that onto one track and that's what you're sending me, you've mixed the snare together to create a snare stem. So it's so funny. It's just important to understand what this stuff is. It's not really important to get into the pecayune details of exactly what these things mean, because over time, meanings change, words change, because you could know what it means by textbook definition. It has no bearing to when somebody says it, what they mean, you're not going to educate every single person you're ever coming in contact with. You're not going to do that. I used to think I could, and I used to try to do that on a person by person basis. When people would tell me what they had or whatever, I would try to educate everybody. It doesn't work. They're going to do and say and talk the way they're going to talk. So you just got to understand what they mean. A lot of times when people say stems, they might mean multitracks and vice versa. So you just have to realize that is also the case when you're dealing with artists who, they're not you. They don't feel the need to understand the difference. So they just are trying to get to an end goal. So anyway, I find this kind of thing devolves more and more and more the more accessible it is to make music. This is just part of it, because when everyone had to go into a studio, everyone sort of was forced to get educated to a certain degree about certain things, because you had to. It was like pay the toll, take the ride. You had to go to the studio. Now you're around people who probably knew something more than you did. They would teach you something, and now you'd leave there with more knowledge. Now everybody does everything themselves. very often incorrectly, very often misunderstood, and there's nothing wrong with the access that everyone has. What's wrong is the fact that all the terminology completely down the toilet, totally devalued, and doesn't nobody gets it, or a lot of people don't. Plenty of us do. Most of you guys who are watching this channel do, but you're going to be dealing with people who don't, is my point. That's really the truth of it. So, it's just the way things are going. The lower or high, the lower this threshold gets for what you have to know to make music. Now you could just put a prompt in and all of a sudden you can make music. The lower the threshold gets for the learning and the practice and the dedication, the more the terminology will go out the window, the more every part of the process that really matters basically goes out the window, because the bar of what is good also becomes like bare bones, ground level. It doesn't even sneak off the ground. And I don't mean good, I mean what's acceptable for someone to consider something they're going to be done, like they're going to make or put out. And I know a lot of mixers would take what they were given and just work on it. And that's actually crazy to me. You're way better off talking to the artist and being like, listen, you got totally, scammed by this person who sent you an AI split version. The only reason they would have done that is because they don't have the stems, because they didn't make them, and they lost their hard drive. They sold their computer at a yard sale or whatever they did. It got lost in a flood or whatever they did or happened to the whatever. They didn't prepare themselves for selling that beat, and now the way it should have been done, and now you're forced to pay the consequences because you built a whole song on a beat that basically has to be left the way it was mixed. And unfortunately, that mix leaves a lot to be desired. To get your vocal to sit within it would be way easier, and it would sound way better at the end if you didn't have to put it on top of it and then sort of try to smush it into something that's already built. You built the car already, you decided everything about it, and now we're going to put the engine in last. We're going to decide what engine it should use. Like, you're crazy. You build the car around the heart of it. The vocals are the heart of the song, in your case, because it's a song where you're a vocalist. So you want your vocals to be the heart of the song. You don't want to just throw it on top like a cherry on top of a cake. That's not what we're doing here. It's not what you should be doing. So anyway, you guys, you got this. Keep it in mind. Pitfalls all over the place. That's why you stay tuned. That's why you check it out, just in case there's something. And maybe I gave you some way to explain this to your artists. If there's, if you know this stuff already, maybe I gave you something else to say to your artists to make sure they don't get scammed. But anyway, you guys got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Questions, comments, answers, throw it in there. I appreciate it. Like, subscribe, follow the deal. You know it. Talk to you soon. Take it easy.